Good morning. Welcome to worship this Sunday, this 8th Sunday after Pentecost. Welcome those who are joining us online as well. It's good to be together in worship. Today we'll have a continuation of our this theme. It's a very short sermon series. I started last week, just 3 parts on rest. Last week was rest by design. This week, rest as resistance. And in thinking about this, the rest series, I thought, you know what? Rest is really hard. Even when I try to rest, I can easily busy myself with distractions, be that entertainment or just other busyness, curiosities that happen when you're scrolling on your phone and whatnot. And then also the just administrative stuff at home, finding things to clean, finding just busy work that needs to be done. All this stuff can happen. So we're trying to really focus in on this series on how we can think about rest differently. So resistance is the one that we'll look at today. And our focus will be on the Exodus passage that I'll be picking up in the sermon. I tried to do something creative and work in this obscure passage from Matthew, but I couldn't make it fit. And sometimes you just have to pivot and focus on what's important, right? So that's what we have to look forward to today. Well, Ken Allen was known for resisting expectations, especially when it came to doing his job. But it's hard to say exactly what his job was. It feels safe to say that Ken Allen wanted more than what he had, what he was experiencing every day. It's hard to say, though, and we'll never know, because Ken Allen was a Bornean orangutan. And he earned notoriety in the 1980s, about 1985. He was an orangutan at the San Diego Zoo, and he became known because he escaped his enclosure 3 times within a period of 3 months, and more times after that. But the zoo authorities were trying to figure out how did he get out? Right? So they increased their surveillance presence. At first, a lot of the zookeepers would put on disguises to try to observe him and figure out where he was escaping, what his method was of escape. But he knew he was being watched. And so he kind of did nothing. They decided we'll introduce some females, hoping to distract him, right? He'll be more interested in the females than he will be in escaping. But he only taught them his ways. And he even learned to set diversions so they could get up to mischief of their own. Well, the zoo invested over $40,000 in security upgrades. Some of these included smoothing the walls of the habitat he was in to make sure that he could not climb out, that there was no holds that were strong enough to hold an orangutan's grip, but he still managed to climb out, surprisingly, scaling walls that they didn't think orangutans could scale. They put in a moat, thinking orangutans do not like water. He would wade across the moat. They installed an electrical fence, and that did stop him for a while at least. Then they made repairs to the moat. This water pump in there needed to be cleaned or repaired. And there was something about it. Maybe he heard the hum of that pump go off, but he waited until they were repairing it, and then made another escape. He became known as Harry Houdini. But the most surprising part, I think, in all of this, the escapes are impressive, but the most surprising part is that Ken Allen, when he escaped, he was found just walking around the zoo, just looking at the other animals. There was apparently another orangutan that he despised, another male orangutan, and he would throw rocks at him. But other than that, Ken would just walk around the zoo and pose with visitors. They were there, many of them were there to see him, see if this guy could get out. When he was caught, he would just calmly go back into his habitat. Now, this was unexpected behavior, of course. And really, any one of these escapes could have gone wrong, right? Could have gone dangerously wrong this huge orangutan would be violent or aggressive towards humans, but he never was. And it's impossible for us to know why Ken Allen did what he did. He was born in captivity. He never knew life in the wild, but he knew how to break these norms, right? And that gave us a glimpse into animal ingenuity that is not usually seen in zoo habitats. But we learn from him that, life is more than just the habitat that we're in. And I think of this story of Ken Allen as this inspiration to appreciate more fully who we are and our relationship to the world. So we come to this story in Exodus today as a story of conflicting authority and identity. Right? Moses comes to Pharaoh and he says, God wants these people to be free. Let them go. But it's a particular kind of freedom. It's not a freedom to do whatever the people want, but Moses wants them to experience the freedom of a covenant relationship with God. A special kind of freedom. And what does Pharaoh say? We're going to look at Pharaoh's responses today. Who is the Lord, that I should listen to him and let Israel go? Pharaoh's immediately threatened by this allegiance, right? And from Pharaoh's perspective, Moses is asking Pharaoh to let the people serve another authority other than him, to serve another ruler. So that automatically is a threat to his power, to who he is. And Moses is also asking Pharaoh to let go of what he thinks is his. But more than that too, Moses wants Pharaoh to turn off the economic engine, right? So Pharaoh's reacting to this opposing authority. You can't tell me what to do, right? But it also reveals that he values economy over human welfare. Next, he says to Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their work? I have to say, I love this image here. Of course, this is an imagined painting here, but the title of it is "The Child Moses Throws Down Pharaoh's Crown." I just like that image there, a little bit of foreshadowing of that biblical story of the Exodus from Egypt here. But look at his language. Why are you taking the people away from their work? Not that the work belonged to the people. That, of course, is a healthy way of looking at work, right? That's looking at work as this blessing when the work belongs to us. But Pharaoh means the people belong to their work. Do you hear that difference? A little bit different there. Pharaoh is saying this system of power that he is in is one where he attaches the Hebrews, their identity, to work. Their identity was tied to what they were producing, what they brought to Egypt and their economy. Very different than what Moses has in mind for the people's identity in relation to God. And we can think about how this happens now, where this shows up. Maybe sometimes in the service industry, migrant labor, a lot of times people associated with their work, and sometimes others do this to us, right? We become associated with the work that we produce. But other times I think we do it to ourselves too. And it happens innocently enough. When we find work especially that gives us meaning, that gives us purpose, work that we're proud of, that's just natural. That's kind of a normal thing that happens in life. And eventually that work becomes part of our rhythm of life. It gets intertwined with our identity, with who we are. Then over time, what happens? Well, we might get to a point where we fear what not working will mean for our identity. Right? Who am I when I have time on my hands? When I do other things, when I'm not associated with this production that I've been so used to doing, so used to engaging in, that can be a really destabilizing time. So entering periods of rest periodically can really help us recover our true identity, right? Who we are. I want to turn next to what is the value of rest as an act of resistance. Because our invitation that we have, I hope we can hear in this passage, in this story, is to see that it's more than just resisting work. Rest is more than that. It allows us to resist a system of grinding productivity and efficiency. Yes, productivity helps us find meaning and purpose, but we know that our humanity can never be reduced to what we produce. So rest helps us resist this reduction of who we are, a reduction of humanity. And when we take time to rest, we can do a mini examine, kind of like that finger prayer I showed earlier in the children's message. When we take time to rest, we can think, oh gosh, okay, I've felt really busy lately. And here's how that showed up. I've been short in my conversations, short in my comments, maybe a little frustrated or on edge. People might have noticed that. How does it show up in my body? I know that when I am particularly stressed, that tension shows up in my shoulders. I feel it in my body. I start thinking, oh, my back really hurts. My shoulders are tight. Oh, that's right. That's where I keep my stress. Rest allows us to slow down, all right, to focus on our relationships, to work, to our families, to God, to our sense of purpose. Last week, I talked about rest as design, where we rest as a time that's set up, that's designed, that's set apart to remember that we're in relationship with God. And I encourage us to think of Sabbath as the actual time that we spend in that relationship. And this week, I'm asking us to focus on rest, recognizing that there are forces in this world and in our lives that need to be resisted in order for us to be in relationship with God. And so the challenge that I hope you can take from here is to ask yourself, where do we hear Pharaoh's voice? Not just in the abstract, not just in a system of capitalism, although it can come from there, but even as we examine that internal drive that we have. What are the voices that we whisper to ourselves? Prove your worth. Try harder. Work harder. Those can be the voices of Pharaoh that we need to resist from time to time, especially as we determine what our identity is and remind ourselves who we are. At the very end of that Exodus passage we heard today, the last words come from Pharaoh. Let heavier work be laid on them. Then they will pay attention to it and not to deceptive words. Now, Pharaoh's logic here is distorted, isn't it? If he's accusing the people of being lazy, he's saying, well, give them more work, and then they'll focus on that and not these deceptive words. But what are the words Pharaoh considers deceptive? Well, they're the words that restore the dignity for God's people. So it's worth remembering that affiliation to God is a threat to the economy of Pharaoh. It's a threat to any power that reduces our identity to what we can produce. And when we enter rest, we do it as a practice of resistance, to acknowledge that there's a real danger in the idolatry of work. It allows us to recenter our identity as people of God. And I think, hopefully, we can maybe channel a little bit of Ken Allen. Be aware of what holds us back, what holds us in. Sometimes we hold back ourselves. maybe we can think creatively about how we can accept the freedom that God wants us to have. Thanks be to God.